Okay, so after physiological arousal, another important element of the emotional experience is going to be cognition. So the questions that we have to ask ourselves about cognition and emotion are first, what is the connection between thought and feeling? And then second, can we feel without thinking at all? And so one of the bits of evidence that we have about how cognition and emotion are linked has to do with the fact that cognition actually does change the emotion that we're experiencing. It's clear that our physiological selves are not the only factor contributing to our emotion. There's something known as the spillover effect, which refers to the fact that we have some sort of lingering physiological arousal from some sort of past event, and that arousal spills over into a current situation. And so, based on the situation, we come up with a label for the physiological arousal, sort of forgetting the fact that the arousal was triggered by another situation entirely. This explains why, unfortunately, so often we see sporting events turning into rioting events. You have a bunch of fans who are in a stadium or an arena and they're all hyped up and there's a lot of adrenaline going and they're excited because they're watching their team. Their team wins, they spill out of that stadium or that arena, and then their physiological arousal, that was excitement, spills over into something else. And so they start, breaking windows and smashing bottles and lighting cars on fire. And so the reason why they're doing that in terms of cognition is that they have something going on within their body and they have to label it as something. It was excitement, but now it gets transformed into something else. So this is anecdotal evidence. There is a study having to do with this, and I will warn you, the next two slides on sort of the end of this lecture, they involve a study that has to do with injection of epinephrine, actually. So there are images of needles. Not actually going into skin, but I know some of y'all might have blood injection phobias, so I wanted to give you a warning. Okay. So this was a study that was done by Schachter and Singer. Hopefully those names sound familiar. When we went over the three basic theories of emotion, Schachter two-factor theory of emotion was one of the big ones, and that was the one that had to do with cognitive labeling. And so we already talked about that bridge experiment. If you don't quite remember that one, make sure you go back and review. But this one has to do with cognitive labeling of some sort of physiological arousal that has been artificially produced. So over the course of this experiment, Schachter and Singer invited a lot of people into a doctor's office. And every participant in the experiment received an injection of epinephrine. Epi, another name for it, is adrenaline. However, whilst everyone experienced the same injection, depending on what group they were in, control or experimental, they were told different things about the injection. One group was told to expect no side effects from this injection. They were injected with it and they were told like no side effects whatsoever going to happen. It's just, like a placebo, nothing to worry about. Other group was told, hey, we've just injected you with some sort of drug which is going to produce probably a feeling of being a little bit hyped up. You're going to feel a little bit jittery maybe. So we have one group which is told no side effects whatsoever. We have another group which is told expect some side effects and these are what they are. Then all of the individuals in the experiment, not all at the same time, but over the course of when they were running the experiment, they'd receive their injection and then they go sit in a waiting room. And in the waiting room would be someone who was part of the experiment. We call this person a confederate, sort of just refresher. Confederate is a term for an individual who has been artificially placed into an experiment to play the part of a participant, but they're just acting. They've been told what to do, and so they're there to hopefully manipulate the participant into doing certain things. And so in the case of this experiment, what the confederate was told to do was to express some sort of extreme emotion. Extreme rage, extreme fear, maybe extreme excitement, but the confederate was told to express something pretty emotionally loud. And so both groups of people were exposed to this confederate, and Schachter and Singer wanted to see, would the two groups handle this experience differently? And what they found was that the group that had been told to expect side effects from their medication didn't exhibit any sort of emotional change. They knew why their body was entering this state of being a little bit aroused and a little bit hyped up, so their emotional state didn't change at all. However, the individuals who were in the group who had been told to expect no side effects, they actually started to mirror the emotional countenance of the confederate. And so this is demonstrating that that because they didn't have a reason for what their body was experiencing, they needed to find a label. And maybe, availability heuristic, using the thing which was most readily available to them, they adopted the emotion that the Confederate was expressing. And so here we can see the impact of that spillover effect, physiological arousal, which is searching for some sort of new label. And the label here was provided by the Confederate in the experiment. So a final takeaway message of the research into the spillover effect is that arousal itself does fuel the emotion. That's why it's one of the basic components of emotion. But cognition's role is to channel that emotion and to provide that label and that attribution for why you're experiencing the arousal you're experiencing.